एक मिनट हाँ.
So let me introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Nitesh Mehra, sir. Had started his journey of practicing law in 2008, and then he remains an official law researcher in Delhi High Court. He is practicing regularly in all the courts of Delhi. The most famous criminal matter he did was nationwide popular case of Baby Falak. He also remained a part of the association in Samjhauta Blast case. He has also got his various criminal and civil cases reported in leading newspapers. Despite being the first generation lawyer, Mr. Mehra has reached these tremendous heights in a short period of time. Sir has been practicing mainly in Delhi High Court and Supreme Court of India and is a leading lawyer in criminal side. From here, I welcome you, sir, to speak on this topic today.
Thank you, Priyanka, for the wonderful introduction. Well, our today's topic is related to the promise to marry, whether amounts to rape or not. This topic has been of a constant discussion over the years in the various judicial pronouncements as well as in the law books and the authors and different advocates and jury. Everybody has their own different perspective on this topic. But for a while, let me start the journey of today's topic with the term rape. The term rape is derived from the Latin term rapto, which means to seize implies forcible seizure. It refers to the ravishment of a woman's against her will and consent which has been obtained by force, fear, fraud. Sexual intercourse with a woman by a man without her consent and chiefly by force or deception is generally known as rape. What is more devastating in today's scenario is the insufficient deterrence against the crimes against women by the law enforcement agencies as well as the legislature, which play the role in suppression of such crimes. In the recent past, there has been several campaigns such as Rape Campaign, Sati Bill, Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, which have drawn strong public pressure on the judiciary to ensure the protection of women under the different heads. At present, India has now got several different laws and preventive measures for the violence against women under the Indian Penal Code. The important sections I draw for your attention is rape under section 376, kidnapping under the age of 16 years from 363 to 373, homicide for diary death, that's 304 part B, torture both mental and physical, 498A, that's called cruelty, outraging the modesty of women under section 354 IPC, sexual harassment in the form of the word, gesture, or act to outrage the modesty of a woman, 509 IPC. Abatement to suicide, that comes under section 306 IPC. From here onwards, I'll take you to the small PPT which we have made today to say more about this topic. So let me take you to this first very picture where a woman is just hiding herself after being getting raped. So what we have to see that how and from where the journey has started. So let me tell you, the reforms in the rape laws as it started from 1983. As amended, Section 375 was overhauled. The definition of rape was also made. Punishments were stipulated under that section. The amendment that took place to the widespread judgment was the Tukaram versus State of Maharashtra. In that case, the ramifications of that particular case of custodial rapes amendments were brought about in the IPC and the Evidence Act. The very main features in the Criminal Law Amendment Act 1983 were Section 376A to D were added to the IPC. Section 114A was introduced in the Indian Evidence Act, by virtue of which a presumption was raised that whenever a rape has been alleged, it has to be presumed that rape has been committed with that woman or a girl. Thereafter, if we see what was the most devastating case which brought the further amendments to the rape laws was the case of Delhi gang rape case, also known as the Nirbhaya gang rape case, and the case name was Mukesh and another versus State Forensity of Delhi and others. The case reported citation is AIR 2014 Supreme Court 1649. After this case, the government set up Justice Verma Committee to recommend legal reforms and suggest ways to eliminate the sexual violation. The main aim of this committee was to create a tough anti-rape law and to make a safer country for women. Justice Verma Committee 2013 made several recommendations which focused on enhanced punishment for brutal sexual assaults. The essence of report is that it holds the state responsible and accountable for the condition of women in the country and calls for a motivated change in the priorities of governance and ensure the bills of rights for women. The Criminal Law Amendment Act 2013 included the following changes. The word rape was again enhanced with a broader meaning, which was comprehensive enough to include any kind of penetration in any body part of woman or a girl. Section 375A to Section 375E IPC has been added. Word voyeurism was also added. But the thing which has been left over was the marital rape. Even despite the recommendations of the Justice Verma Committee, the same has not been taken up by the legislatures. The reason behind that may be known to a lot of us, being the patriarchal society. Further, the legislature enacted the Criminal Law Amendment Act 2018, Indian Evidence Act 1872, the Code of Criminal Procedure, and the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012. The salient features of the Act are that the minimum jail for 20 years extendable up to life in prison, death sentence for a rape of girl under 12 years, perpetrators involved in gang rape of a girl below 12 years, or imprisonment or death. So, amendment was made to section 376(1), increasing the term of punishment for perpetrators from 7 years to 10 years. The amendment under section 376 additionally makes a provision for the fine for the victim. Section 439 of the CRPC was amended to make it imperative for the courts for grant of bail in case of section 376(3), 376(ab), 376(da), 376(db) of the IPC to give notice of the application of the bail to the public prosecutor. Earlier, in the rape cases also, when the law was not amended prior to 2018, there was no necessity. But by giving a necessity to this, there has always been a chance for the victim to come and say their part also and to oppose the bail application of the accused. Now, section 375 IPC is punishable under section 376 IPC, which provides the punishment. The subject of rape falls under chapter 16, offense relating to human body of the offenses under the IPC. I am not going to the literal definition, it's already there in the books. So there must be sexual intercourse as and understood in the terms of provisions of section 375. A sexual intercourse must be under any of these 7 circumstances. Number 1, it should be against the will. Number 2, without her consent. Number 3, when the consent has been obtained under the fear of death or hurt. Consent given under the misconception of fact that the man is her husband. Consent given by reason of unsoundness of mind, intoxication, or under influence, stupefying, unwholesome substance. With a woman under the age of 18 years of age, with or without consent, it is deemed to be a statutory rape. With a woman who is unable to communicate consent, so any physical relationship made with her and if she alleges that there is a rape by somebody, then that is also known as rape. Now, what is important in today's session of ours to understand that what is the concept of will and consent, because these two are very important in today's webinar, as it holds that how and in what manner it has to be dealt in under different cases. So section 375 clearly says against her will, act done against the will of a woman when she is fully conscious, capable of consenting and is aware of what is being done, resists or objects to the act. So these two words, resists or objects, are very important, because if there is such a heinous act which has been committed against a woman, against her consent and against her will, and if there is no resistance or there is no objection from her side, certainly section 375 would not attract. Law emphasizes consent to be obtained before the sexual intercourse and shouldn't be under fear. A sleeping woman, person retained intoxicated, is incapable of giving consent. So these are the literal words which has to be separated from the definition to carve out that what is will and what is consent. The legislature has also said that the consent of a girl below 16 years of age is not considered to be a valid consent. Law presumes incapable of consenting due to her lack of understanding of the implications of her consent. The word consent and submission often confused. Consent means submission, but submission does not at any cost mean consent. Consent should not accrue at any cost due to fear or threat. Often the courts judge consent based on injury of the victim. The word will implies the faculty of reasoning power of the mind that determines whether to do an act or not. So, what is the difference between this will and consent that has to be understood to understood the today's subject of our session? There is a very fine distinction between an act done against the will and an act done without the consent. Every act done against the will is obviously without the consent, but every act without the consent is not against the will. Section 375 clause 1 applies where the woman is in possession of her senses and therefore capable of consenting. Here I want to quote one judgment of State of UP versus Chote Lal 2011 2 SCC 550. The Supreme Court explained that the expression against her will would ordinarily mean that intercourse was done by a man with a woman despite her resistance and opposition. In State of Punjab versus Gurmeet Singh, a young girl below the age of 16 years was abducted from the school by three accused in a car, was made to drink liquor and then raped by each one of them, in turn under the threat of being killed. Allowing the state appeal and holding the accused persons liable for rape, since at no point of time prosecutrix willingly cooperated with the act. Apex Court held that the sexual intercourse was against her will, for which the accused are liable for committing rape under section 376. So this word against her will has to have a profound meaning while dealing with such cases, whether there was a false promise made by the accused or not. So therefore we have State of Punjab versus Gurmeet Singh. In addition to this, there were certain guidelines were also given. Delay in FIR is not material when properly explained. Generally what we have seen that the delay in reporting the rape cases has resulted into the acquittal of the accused persons. And because of such lacuna, the guilty minds get scot free and they feel like they have a right and license to lavish a woman's body. The testimony of victims in cases of sexual assault is a vital, and unless there are compelling reasons, so the court should not look for the corroboration of such statement. And the sole testimony of the prosecutrix is sufficient to convict any accused in a case of rape. So trial of a Sexual offences was said to be done in camera and invariably by a lady judge wherever available. The court must restrain making observations that insinuate that the prosecutor is a girl of a loose moral character. Not only the court, it should be the bounden duty of the public prosecutor to look when the accused persons come for bail in a case of a heinous crime like rape, then that the other side, the accused side or the defense counsel should not make such marks on the character of the woman. Court is under the obligation to see that prosecutor is not unnecessarily harassed and humiliated in cross-examination in case of a rape trial. Many we have seen that cross-examination does not relate to the defense of the case, and in order to unnecessarily harass a girl who has reported a rape case, the cross-examination being getting continued. Now the time has come when the court should intervene and stop such cross-examinations which are not related to the defense of the accused in a rape case, so that a lady who has reported the case of a rape should not get harassed at the hands of the defense counsel. The essence of rape is absent of consent. Consent means an intelligent positive concurrence of the will of the woman. The policy behind the exemption from liability in the case of consent is based on the principle that a man is the best judge of his or her own interest, and if a man, includes woman, decides to suffer harm voluntarily, he or she cannot be complained of it when it comes about. So, while going with anyone for having a physical intimacy, a girl should always keep in mind that whether the act is going to be a voluntary, and if that act is voluntary without any objection or resistance, then the later results may cannot be complained of by her. So one have to be prudent for his or herself. According to the explanation 2, a consent means an unequivocal voluntary agreement when the person by words, gestures or any form non-verbal communication communicates a willingness to participate in a specific sexual act. So the code nowhere defines what does not constitute consent. It's the acts, means, willingness, intentions of someone to have a sex with their own consent amounts to their positive consent and no consent. So what is important in today's topic is section 90, which says misconception of fact. Under section 90 Indian Penal Code, consent is not such a consent as intended by any of the section of this code. If the consent given by a person under the fear of injury or under a misconception of fact, and if that person doing it act knows or has a reason to believe that the consent was consequence of such fear or misconception, so in those cases that would not be considered as a valid consent. Misconception revolves around the knowledge of the fact that the consent being given is a result of misrepresentation, and in the absence of the same, the act of sexual nature is most likely not to take place. In the case of Dilip Kumar versus State of Bihar, the apex court laid down two-point tests to adjudicate upon the nature of consent. If the consent was given under a fear of threat or injury, if the consent was given as a result of misrepresentation leading to a misconception of fact, there is a choice to be made on the part of the female, and the said choice is to be made between resistance and assent. The said choice forms the misconception or the conception of consent. So consent given by an adult female in such cases should be based on an intelligent understanding of the nature and consequences of the sexual act. Such understanding is to be free from any influence or fraud or misrepresentation. Questions of social and moral values are to be decided by the parties to such an act and not by the court. As I have told you earlier, that one who is going themselves for being getting physical or intimated, The case rests on them that how and in what manner they are going to do it. To absolve a person from criminal liability, consent must be given freely. It must not be obtained by fraud or by mistake or under misconception of fact. We cannot say that this consent should be obtained on the papers to have a sex with somebody or to have physical intimacy of the two persons who are of major age. But naturally, you have to see that this consent by not the means which has been stated above. This clause operates where a woman is unresponsive, whether because of the influence of the alcohol or drugs or any other cause that may be, or so imbecile that she is incapable of giving any rational consent. So, as we have an example of a movie Pink also, taking a girl into a room, having a drink with her, does not give license to a male partner to lavish her body or to do sex with her. So, the circumstances stating therein that when that girl hits that man, that itself will include two words, that is an objection and resistance. So, when there is an objection and resistance pursuant to that act also, then that would means that the girl is not ready for being physically intimated to that boy. Consent of a woman has to be obtained prior to the act, as was laid down in the case of Bhat Prabha Rudha. The burden of proof in case of charge of rape will lie upon the prosecution to prove that the sexual intercourse was without the consent and against the will of the woman. It would not be necessary for the defense to prove that the sexual intercourse was with the consent of the woman. Then we have this landmark judgment of Pramod Surya Bhan Pawar versus the state of Maharashtra in another 2019 SCC Online 1073. The Honorable Supreme Court of India on 21st August 2019 in this matter has observed that there has been a distinction between a false promise to marry and a breach of promise to marry, which is made in good faith but subsequently not fulfilled, where the intention of the maker at the time of making the promise to marry itself was not to abide by it, but to deceive the woman to convince her to engage in sexual relations. There is a misconception of fact that vitiates the woman's consent. The court held the burden always in such cases lies upon the prosecution to prove that the promise to marry was a promise which was given when there was no intention to honor it, and that such a promise was the only reason why a woman agreed to a sexual relationship. The bench made a distinction between a false promise given on the understanding by the maker that it will be broken and the breach of a promise which is made in good faith but subsequently not fulfilled. The bench held that where the promise to marry is false and the intention of the maker at the time of making the promise itself was not to abide by it, but to deceive the woman to convince her to engage in sexual relations, there is a misconception of it that vitiates the woman's consent under section 375 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. So now, what are these consent which are based on the false promise to marry? There has been a constant debates on this topic, where a woman consents to sexual intercourse under the assumption of promise to marry. The falsity of the promise doesn't ipso facto vitiate the consent. It depends on whether the accused promise was false from its inception or not. So generally in these cases what has to be seen that the time at which this promise was made, what was the circumstances compelling around that time, whether this boy was going to be married very soon, whether there has been a clever deal which has been played by the boy. So the circumstances around that fact has to be seen to rule out the will and the consent on the part of the girl. In Dilip Singh versus State of Bihar 2005 1 SCC 88, The appellant was charged and convicted under Section 376 IPC for committing a rape of a minor girl. The victim alleged that accused forcibly raped her and later consoled her that he would marry her. Accordingly, on account of the promise for marriage made by him, she agreed to have sexual relations with him. Although the trial court and high court convicted the accused, the Supreme Court set it aside. It was held that the consent given by the woman believing the man promised to marry her would fall within the expression without her consent under clause 2 of section 375 IPC only. If it is established that from the very inception the man never intended to marry her and promised was a mere hoax. In Uday versus State of Karnataka 2003 Criminal Law Journal 1539 Supreme Court, accused promised to marry the prosecutrix on a later date. Prosecutrix was quite aware that they belonged to different castes and proposal of their marriage would be opposed by their family members. Yet the prosecutrix started cohabiting with the accused consciously and became pregnant to this boy. On the charge of the rape, the court held that the consent given by the prosecutrix for the cohabitation cannot be said to be under misconception of fact. Because there this girl knew that as the marriage proposal would never be fertile, this would not be get acceded to. Their parents will not allow them to marry. Still, she went ahead and cohabited with this boy. So then the misconception of fact is ruled out. In the case of Yedla Srivasa Rao versus State of Andhra Pradesh, Supreme Court laid down that what is voluntary consent and what is not voluntary consent will depend upon the facts of each case. Definitely, laying down a state jacket formula for all the cases would not suffice the purpose. It would be upon time to time when the judicial pronouncements will come out and at the different circumstances and in different facts, the court will interpret the misconception of fact as defined under section 90 of the IPC according to the given facts and circumstances of the case. However, in the case of Deepak Gulati versus State of Haryana 2013 7 SCC 675, Supreme Court cleared that distinction has to be made between the breach of promise and not fulfilling the false promise. So now what is the present view of the Supreme Court? These all which I have talked about till now were the earlier position, but now the Supreme Court has taken different views on such situations now. In Pradeep Kumar Verma versus State of Bihar 2007 4 Criminal Law Journal 4333 Supreme Court, it was held that in case of a representation deliberately made by the accused with a view to eliciting the assent of the victim without having intention to marry her will vitiate the consent given by the victim. It was also observed that if on the facts it is established that very inception of the making of the promise, the accused did not really have the intention of marrying the victim and the promise was a mere hoax, the consent given by the victim will not be of any avail and the accused to exculpate him in the ambit of section 375 second clause, such representation would vitiate the clause definitely. In the case of Kaini Rajan versus State of Kerala 2013 9 SEC 113, was established if there are some circumstances which cast some doubt in the mind of the court of the veracity of the victim's evidence, then it is not safe to rely on the uncorroborated version of the victim of the rape. Taking it to the very recent case which has just happened, one case came for anticipatory bail before the Karnataka High Court, wherein it was observed that this woman, being of tender age of 42 years, had a physical intimacy with a boy who is just of some 20s, who is working in his firm. So she leveled an allegation of rape. The court held that going in the night time with her own consent, having drinks with the boy, and thereafter, when this rape has been committed upon her, she got slapped, and she said that because she was tired after performance of such physical intimacy with him as which she narrated as a rape, the court took it into account and given anticipatory bail to the accused, stating that they feel a doubt in such allegation, as reportedly, if an Indian woman has been raped, she immediately go and report the case to the police. However, the underreporting of the case have been resulting into such more and more increasing of acts where there are no reporting. Applying this principle, the apex court in the case of Prashant Bharti versus State of NCT of Delhi noted that since the victim was already married at the time of commission of the alleged offence, and therefore she being clearly aware of subsisting a valid marriage with someone else, could not have been induced into a physical relationship with the accused on the basis of a false promise to marry. Since this aspect of assurance stood falsified, the consensual physical relationship between the parties could not constitute an offence under Section 376 of the IPC. In Vinod Kumar versus State of Kerala, 2014 5 SCC 678, the Honorable Supreme Court noted that the victim was aware that accused was already married and had consulted an imam to inquire if the accused can convert so that they may enter into polygamy. In such a situation, the court held that it is not possible to convict a person who did not hold out any promise and did not present a false scenario which had the consequence of inducing the other party into the commission of an act and hence was held guilty. So, if you see from the different judicial pronouncements, the facts coming out of such cases are all different. So, when the court takes up that case with regard to section 90 of the IPC, it does not ipso facto stick on the facts of that case, but prosecution has been casted with a duty to prove it beyond the reasonable doubt. Only alleging that this rape was committed on the pretext of false promise to marry would not suffice. There has to be more material than that. The Supreme Court reiterated in the judgment of Anurag Soni versus State of Chhattisgarh, reported in 2019 6 scale 211, that in no uncertain terms that the consent of a sexual intercourse obtained by a person by giving false promise of marriage would not excuse him for rape charges. All those men who dare to indulge in sex after giving false promise of marriage must now always bear it in mind must always bear in mind that they will not be excused from rape charges as has been held in the recent case. Most recently, this is again a Pramod Suryaben judgment. The two judgments comprising of Justice D.Y. Chandrachud and Indira Banerjee laid down in the case of this Pramod Suryaben Pawar that the consent of a woman under section 375 is vitiated on the ground of a misconception of fact, where such misconception was the basis for her choosing to engage in the said act. The court said the promise of marriage must have been a false promise, given in bad faith and with no intention of being adhered to at that time when it was given. The false promise itself must be of immediate relevance or bear a direct nexus to the woman's decision to engage in the sexual act, the bench observed. The court added that an individual who makes a reasoned choice to act after evaluating various alternative actions as well as the various possible consequences flowing from such action or inaction consents to such action. So if we go to the analysis of the same, section 375 is an unambiguous and exhaustive provision. Being a penal provision, nothing ought to be read into it. It has to be construed strictly, and the words cannot be strained to introduce a new meaning to the offence. There are six descriptions mentioned in section 375. Each such description is different and distinct from the other. The relevant fact or that differentiates each description is the nature and quality of the consent or the lack of it. Section 90 is a general definition in the chapter of general exceptions and cannot override a specific provision of the code. The definition of the consent as provided in section 90 of the IPC could apply to the other provisions in the IPC like section 87, 88, 89 of IPC, where the term covered consent has been used but not defined or made restricted. However, it cannot directly apply to section 375 where the scope and nature of consent and circumstances under which it stands vitiated as has been expressly defined. The general definition clause could not have overridden a clear and exhaustive special provision to introduce into the scope of the section an offence which was not intended by the legislature. So, the word 375, the word rape as has been defined in section 375, so without the consent given in there cannot be misread with misconception of fact under section 90. Once again in the case of Uday versus State of Karnataka, which was the first of the judgments held that the false promise to marry cannot come within the ambit of the misconception of fact. The Honorable Court in fact went into the extent of keeping the questions of law open on the exhaustive nature of section 375. While coming to this firm conclusion, Dilip Singh's judgment did not consider any of the arguments raised in Uday's case. The fact that question of law had been left open in Uday's case was also not considered. Dilip Singh's judgment without considering any of the relevant arguments went to hold that the definition of the word consent cannot be restricted to section 90 and a definition even wider than one given in section 90 can be imported to section 375 to define the offence of rape. It finally held that a representation deliberately made by the accused with a view to elicit an consent of the victim without having the intention or inclination to marry her will vitiate the consent given. Finally, I want to again reiterate this Pramod Suryaban Pawar case, where it has been observed that there is a distinction between a false promise to marry and a breach of a promise to marry, which is made in good faith but subsequently not fulfilled, where the intention of the maker at the time of making of the promise to marry itself was not to abide by it, but to deceive the woman to conceive her, to engage in sexual relations. There is a misconception of fact that vitiates the woman's consent. So with this, I want to conclude with 4-5 points that the safety and security of women in our country has become a serious issue, so such that a hashtags that no one wants to be an Indian daughter are trending at all the time high. We thus turn towards the judiciary to ensure that there are effective implementation of the laws and subsequent safety of liberty or well-being of the citizens. The seriousness with which a judge views the crimes is also reflected in the sentence which he awards to the offender. The amendments to the rape laws in 1983 increased the punishments to a minimum of 7 years in ordinary rape cases and 10 years in case of custodial rape, now have been further increased by the amendment of 2018 after the Delhi gang rape case. Even the most of the punishment meted out were less than the statutory minimum. The cases in which the life sentences were awarded were cases which involved sexual assault and murder of young victims. The amendment gave the court the discretion to lower the sentences for adequate and special reasons to be given in writing. Often the reason cited for giving a relatively shorter sentence of imprisonment is to show that popular feudal and patriarchal myths about the rapist and the reason why he committed the crime influenced the judge's reasoning. Since the courts have been authorized to award lesser sentence by the legislature, the sentencing pattern presents a varied picture which our judges cannot even avoid to. In practice, in almost every rape case, a less than minimum sentences are awarded. Even if the victim of the right is changed, the attitude of the courts has not been quite different. In my view, it's high time that the perpetrators should be given the maximum of the punishments. But further, I would like to add into this that whether false promise to marry amounting to rape or not, it always depends upon the different facts and cases and the circumstances. So, where a woman really feels that she has been cheated under the misconception of fact, that is section 90 IPC, what is the recourse for her is to immediately report the case to the police and get her medical conducted, because delay in such cases would always be fatal to the prosecution case and the case of the victim. The promise such made by the boy that he would marry this girl after being having into the physical intimacy, so the girl should have all the beliefs and the faith in such boy with whom she is going for an intercourse without being seeing the blind future. I have came across a case wherein this woman has been promised by the boy, and she has been several times taken for the physical intimacy and the sexual relationships at different places. But when a time she became pregnant, this boy said that I will cannot marry you because my parents has already fixed my marriage with somebody else. And for that he even asked her to keep mum and take several lakh of rupees from him. So the such nature and such underreporting of such crimes at that very moment results in the acquittal in the cases which falls in the category of false promises to marry, whether amounts to rape or not. Definitely, there is a duty which has been casted not only by the legislature, but the duty is also casted by oneself. So, while deciding our own act, we have to be made responsible for ourselves, because we cannot put a blame on the judiciary by stating that even though a rape was committed by the person upon the woman, but the same was not considered to be as a rape, and the accused has been let go free. So with this, I conclude the today's session on this present topic, and I would look for if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving this wonderful insight on the topic false promise to marry amounts to rape or not. So there are few questions from our audience, and I need to speak it out on behalf of them. So the first question which was asked is, there are instances where many a times power given to women's are misused by them and to defame the other party, and many a times cross cases are being filed. So what is the best policy and what is the best defense as a young lawyer we need to use to protect our client?
No, firstly, you need to tell me whether you are asking from the side of the victim or of the side of the accused.
From the side of accused.
So if you are looking from the side of the accused, definitely what you have to look in from the angle that when this case has been reported, when the offense was committed, what was the time lapse between the offense reported and offense committed. So all these factors together would make out a strong case for the accused definitely, and to rule out that whether there was no rape and it was consented and that girl came herself for that physical intimacy. So all those factors would definitely corroborate. And what is, in most of the cases of rape, what we see that people harp upon the medical evidence. Nowadays, there has been several judgments of Supreme Court which says that even medical evidence cannot be a sole basis for making somebody a convict in a rape case or a reason for acquittal. So my advice to all the young lawyers is to just look into the first information report as has been reported by the prosecutrix. And yes, you are correct to that effect also. In some of the cases, we have also looked for that these are the cases of extortion. So because there is, I'll say, there is a Katrina of cases which were, coming into for last few years, where we have seen that the girl has deliberately reported the matter in order to get out money or to order to get out regal the personal grievances from the boy. So the prosecution also have been casted with a duty not to turn blind eye on the statements, but to first see to it that on the prima facie it amounts to rape or not. But as there has been several judicial pronouncements time to time, now the prosecution is bound in with the fact that if there is any crime related to a woman, they have to first report it. So what our young lawyers has to see that the defenses are properly taken by looking into the entire facts and circumstances of the case.
Thank you, sir. So another question which was asked by a student named Rishabh is that how would you see the current criminal law which are in place are effective enough in dealing with such a heinous crime like rape?
So, as far as the laws are concerned, now I'll say that after this Delhi gang rape case and 2018 amendment of Act by the Justice Verma Committee, the laws has been made now very stringent. They are very strict, they are very stringent, and if somebody really commits this offense and it comes to the clutches of law, then there are very less chances that that person will get an acquittal. If you see section 114A, that presumption was added only because of the fact that whatever woman is saying, that has to be considered as a gospel truth in a case of a rape, because nobody would bear it on their own character that she has been raped by such a man under whatever may be the circumstances. So the laws are now, I'll say, they are very stringent, and the legislature has done a good homework after being given by the Justice Verma Committee, and the judges are also looking at it from different angle. And in most of the cases where they see that there is no doubt in the prosecution story, they straight away go in convicting the accused in the rape case by awarding the maximum sentence.
There is another question. So, sir, are you able to hear me? So, am I audible?
Yes, I can.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, sir. So the another question is, we in our society mostly follow the deterrent theory. So is this theory is really effective in urban crimes, like the crimes which are happening in urban society right now, and even in rural areas also? So when we are seeing that the world is heading towards more liberalized theory, so do we need to follow these deterrent and traditional theory in the present scenario or present world?
So let me clarify you, Preeti. The question is a little diluted one, as the theory which we are following in India is not deterrent. The sentencing policy in India is reformative. But as far as the cases related to the heinous offences are concerned, that is rape, murder, dacoity, in those circumstances, court has formulated a policy for themselves to follow a deterrent theory somewhat to make these offenders and accused realize that what they have done is not only wrong against the victim but as a society as a whole. So the morals are also kept in mind by the judges while giving the sentence to these accused persons. So deterrence should be there, because if it is removed from the sentencing policy, then this would be giving a free nod to these accused persons to commit more crimes. So in my view, as we are already in this reformative theory, and in our jails also, such a system has already been adopted that these accused persons who are there, they try to commit more crimes. So definitely they have to be kept behind the bars as they have committed an offense. Reformative theory has already been followed by our Indian system. So, but stating it to be that we should not adhere to deterrence policy, in my view, is not correct, because giving it a nod means increasing the crimes against the women. So the laws, as stringent as they can be made, should be made when there are offences relating to the offences against the woman, and that too without her consent and will.
So another very interesting question is asked. So at one side, our system provide equality to both gender, whereas it is seen that majorly our criminal laws are women centric only. And a world where nowadays we are talking about the rights of LGBT, we are lacking behind the laws related to men. And taking the recent case happened in Tamil Nadu, don't you think now it is the time to highlight the issues related to men, like assault over to men and men rape? So do you think it is the right time to include men rape into the definition of rape laws, or providing punishments in regarding to uh, area related to male category basically?
Kriti, uh, the question is very interesting, and if you see or you go little back, Justice Verma's committee has made several recommendations. Out of that, one recommendation was also there to make marital rape as an offense. But the Indian legislature didn't look into that, and they negated that the situation of marital rape in India is worse than it is of most of the under crimes in India. Not only the men, but also the women do not recognize the marital rape in India. The value of sacrosanct attached with the institution of marriage is a major reason for not recognizing the concept of marital rape in India. So, first to take from this point only, that how difficult it is for our legislature to go for something which is not acceptability in our society. So the laws are framed in a view to see that whether they are accepted in the society as a whole, to keep the social factors in the mind. So the question is very good, but I may say that we are still very far lagging behind from many other countries who have already gone into such an extent by taking those offenses also punishable. But as in India, we see it very difficult. Another suggestion which I would add, or I will say the answer to this question, is that the very definition of section 375 says that it is against the will and consent of a woman. So the word man is not there. So including word man there would means you have to amend the entire law, which again need a legislature approval, a debate, a discussion, and passing it from both the houses, and then getting it a consent of president to make it a law. So yes, in putting the questions we can put, but for implementing it is again a very difficult task. The cases, instances had been happening, but yes, at the max there has been some other provision which is there under which they can be reported, but not within the term of the rape, because section 375 of the Indian Penal Code does not says a sexual intercourse against the will and consent of a man. So therefore, as of now, I see it very difficult that how this would be included in the category of rape. Still, we hope it is for the wisdom of the legislature and our judiciary who would look into such cases and would devolve some method. Because the case which I just dealt you with, the fact that even the marital rape has not been said to be a rape in India, That was also dealt by the judiciary, and judiciary said that the only offense which can be made out is section 498A, that is cruelty. So these are the lacunas in our law which has to be fulfilled, and the persons who have the makers, they have to do it.
With this, there is a last question which is asked by my friend, Mr. Nikhil. He asked a very question related to the recent amendment in the criminal law after Nirbhaya and Khatua and Unnao rape case. So how far the new amendments has provided relief to the victim?
Now, as far as the new amendments are concerned of section this 2018, they have naturally provided lots and lots of improvement, as first of all the punishments to these cases have been increased. A deterrent theory has been adopted by our judiciary to punish these accused persons. Not only this, they have also provided a provision for the compensation for the victim's family. That too not from the side of the state, but also from the side of the accused persons who have committed such an act. So all these cases which you have just said, they have shaken the wisdom of our country. They have brought the youth on the road, and because of the youth coming on the road, these laws have been amended, or I may say they have been bound to force to be amended. And such a way all these laws have been now made that they are in a way protecting the woman and a girl who is going out of the house for a profession, for a job, or otherwise. Somewhat starting feeling safe, that now, since some of the persons who have been executed also would give a message to these accused persons who even does not think before doing such a heinous act of rape.
Thank you so much, sir, providing such insight from the subject or related to rape. I over to Akansha for the further.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kriti. It is my immense pleasure to take a moment to thank sir for being here with us today. It was, I would say, a very interactive and informative session with sir. And the topic chosen was also a very bold one. As we all know, it is important for all of us to know the latest judicial developments on the subject, which has currently raised a lot of upheaval in our society relating to the safety of women. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us to tell us all that you have today in your lecture. It was an honor to have you on our board, sir. Lastly, I would also like to thank our viewers who have taken out time to stay with us till the end. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to moderate the webinar as well.
Thank you, Kansha, for such a wonderful thanking note. I'm blessed to have all the moderators with me who were there in the today's session. Thank you to Priti, thank you to Akansha and to Priyanka who have moderated the today's webinar, and all my viewers who have been there along with me in this short journey. With these words, I conclude today's webinar. Thank you all of you.